Hello, this is Josh Martinez, co-host of the Tread and Tron Tales podcast. Welcome to the 7th episode of our first season, where we will talk with Ethan Coffey. In this episode, we will talk with Ethan Coffey about his extensive distance running career, and we'll discuss his wins at our hometown Knoxville Marathon, his Badwater 135 race experience, and his various Backyard Ultramarathons. Ethan has a diverse running portfolio and has found success in 5Ks all the way to ultra marathons, 135 miles. Ethan has tried and learned a lot over the past 2 decades about running, which we will extensively dive into. Tune in for this exciting and insightful episode, and check out our other 6 episodes, which are all posted wherever you find podcasts. And new episodes drop on Friday, and we hope that you enjoy this episode.
Okay, well, welcome to our podcast here. And first, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and your connection with running?
So my name is Ethan Coffey. I'm 41 years old, and I've been running competitively since freshman year of high school, which would be 1998. Um, one of my achievements, I guess, is that I've run a sub 5 minute mile every year since my freshman year of high school. So if I get it done this year, it'll be 26 years in a row where I've
Wow.
run at least one sub 5 minute mile. I grew up in Northern Virginia, went to school in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, Division III, ran there. Not super successful, but good enough to stay on the Division III team that doesn't have athletic scholarships. Then I joined the Navy, was down in Charleston for 4 years. Didn't really run much while I was down there, just basically stayed healthy. And then when I moved to Knoxville in 2009, started getting involved in the running community here, which is incredible, and meeting all these super fast people running a lot of miles, and bumped my mileage up and started doing more workouts and bigger long runs, and got in marathons around 2008, 2009, and I think I've run a total of 30, 35 marathons. And then eventually got the ultra bug, and so started jumping in some 50Ks. Actually, while I was training for the marathons, I started running 50Ks as training runs. So to get the mental space right, where you can think where 26 miles doesn't feel that long. And then got into even longer 100-milers, Badwater 135. And so now at 41, I've kind of hit all my bucket list items. And so I'm resting on my laurels a little bit and actually starting to jump back into 5Ks. So back where it all started again. And as a masters runner, just trying to see how well I can compete with the younger guys.
Did you start running races in the 2000 after 2009 when you moved to Knoxville, or had you done any other than running in Carnegie Mellon? Were you doing any races between then?
Yeah, I've been running races since I was a little kid because my parents were actually both pretty avid runners, and I actually way back I lived in Japan, and Japan is like distance running crazy, and so my parents would go to 5K road races, and eventually when I was like maybe 7 or 8, I started running those, and wasn't training for them. I was doing little league baseball or whatever, but I would just jump in a 5K. And first time I beat my mom, I threw up at the finish line. So that was, I think I was 9 or 10 years old, and I beat my mom in a 5K, and that was a big accomplishment for me. But then, yeah, when I was obviously running a lot of races in high school and college, and I've been, running road races pretty much, yeah, as long as I can remember.
Yeah, that's similar to how I got into run. I ran kids miles when my mom was running races, and the
Hmm.
first we ran the 5K in 2017 together.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was a minute ahead of her too in that race. But she ran the marathon the next day, so that was like
Oh yeah,
big
That wasn't a good
accomplishment.
idea. That wasn't a good idea.
yeah. I had to outkick my mom. I wasn't a minute ahead of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've always been in front of me. Always.
And so, What inspired you to first look at doing the Knoxville Marathon here? And it's been known for being a really tough and hilly race. So, yeah, what inspired that?
I mean, the local race always kind of, gets your attention. So I was running a lot of miles with kind of the older, now the old guard of the Knoxville running community, which would be like Stuart Ellington, Andy Baxa, Alan Horton. When I got to Knoxville in 2009, Stuart Ellington had been the last local male to win the Knoxville Marathon, and then people were coming. You had people coming in from Kentucky or Alabama, Atlanta, winning the race, and then taking off. And I started to improve my running, and I realized if I had a good day, I could win. And it was really kind of like a Knoxville pride kind of thing. Like I wanted to bring the victory back home to Knoxville. So when I won in 2015, I was the first Knoxville native to win since Stewart had won in 2000. I think he went back to back in 2007, 2008, something like that.
Okay, okay.
So that was really the big driver. Was I just wanted to be the next local to win.
Yeah, and had you run a marathon before tackling that race, or was that your first
Oh
marathon?
yeah, yeah. I've
Okay.
been beating my head against the marathon wall for a while, um, and Knoxville is definitely a tricky race to run well. And I think that was one of my benefits was I had a lot of marathon experience. I'd also started dipping my toes in the 50K. Um, when I ran the Knoxville Marathon, actually my marathon PR had come during a 50K. Um,
Mm.
because
Huh.
I kept running marathons and kept kind of just slightly misjudging my fitness
Mhm.
or the weather conditions or something and just going out a little bit too hard or something went wrong and just kind of dying the last however many miles, 10 to 5 to 10 miles.
Mhm.
And so I started jumping in 50Ks to get my mental head right about marathon's not that far. You can run a good marathon if you know what you're doing. But I think in 2015, the Knoxville Marathon had been maybe my 10th marathon, something like that. I'd done Boston a few times. Um, I did the Charleston Marathon. I did a couple 50Ks.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it was not definitely not the first one, but it was the biggest one that I'd ever definitely that I've ever won.
Yeah, yeah.
Ethan, it's interesting that you, as someone who has qualified for Boston and who has won a marathon, mentioned you said hitting this marathon. Did you call it a wall or something like that? Like you're
Marathon
always
wall,
trying to
Yeah,
yeah.
figure out this
yeah,
marathon thing.
yeah.
That's interesting because I'm just a mid-pack runner, and the marathon is just like this thing. I'm always doing something wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, I go out on that race and there's something I've done wrong, or it's 10 things I did wrong. And it's constantly this continual goal of, I've got to get it right. I've got to get it right. So
Hmm.
it's really interesting to hear someone of that when you've actually won a marathon, but you're still saying there's something about that race that is a struggle. Do you find the marathon is a certain distance, but then when you go into your 50Ks and your ultras, that it's not the same?
Yeah, and absolutely, we all go through the same things, no matter how fast you're running the marathon. Everyone has the same issues with pacing themselves right, nutrition, hitting the wall, whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I I was actually when I in Knoxville, I was actually ready to quit marathons because I had run so many marathons and they'd all gone so poorly. And I was fit. I knew I was fit. I was hitting the workouts. I was getting mileage in, and then on race day, it just kept not coming through for me. And so for me, everything just came together perfectly that one day at the Knoxville Marathon, and I was really familiar with the course. I had perfect weather. My pacing was spot on, and it and at that point, once you do a good one, once everything goes, when things go well, it's such a draw. You're like, I want that feeling again. I want to feel like I did the last, 10K of that marathon, where I felt like I was working hard and I was struggling, but I was also running fast. And, being able, I think I ran 2:22 at that marathon, and I think I ran a 3 minute negative split. So, my second half was under 70 minutes, which is like 5:15 pace or something. And yeah, I was just cruising, and it felt incredible. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, you know, maybe I should stick with this marathon thing. It can be fun. It can be really rewarding if you get it right.
Well, I thank you for that. That's really inspiring. That's going to be helpful for a lot of people who struggle
Uh-huh.
with the marathon, that you were ready to quit and then you came back and you won a marathon. I mean, I appreciate that.
Everyone there goes through the same issues.
Mentally, how did you get through that particular race, being in the lead? Was that your first marathon that you'd ever won?
Yeah, that was my first marathon that I ever won. I actually wasn't in the lead. There was a guy from Kentucky who had run a 2:18 or 2:19 at Richmond. So I obviously,
Hmm.
you kind of scout out the field before
Yeah.
the race, so you kind of know who's in the race. And there's a few guys who I was worried about, and I knew he had run a pretty fast time, but he went out hard through the Cherokee Hills,
Mhm.
and coming through World's Fair Park. This is back when the race finished in Neyland Stadium, and through the half marathon, you actually went through World's Fair Park, and he had about a minute and a half on me,
Mm.
at 13 miles. But I'd been doing all my workouts on Cherokee Boulevard. I knew, like, I was doing all my tempos. I was doing long runs through there, and so I was comfortable with the pace that I was running, and I could sustain it. And I ended up pulling up alongside him around mile 17. And at first, I thought, I was like, well, this guy's way better than I am. Why is he letting me catch him? And I thought he was just, almost playing around. And once I caught him, he was gonna take off, and I was running for second. But I passed him. You want to try to pass with authority, right? So I kind of like stepped up a little bit and passed him, and he had no response. And at that point, that was around mile 17, 18. And from then on, it was full gas, just to make sure that there was never any question whether I was gonna stay ahead of him or not. And he ended up, I think, once he knew he wasn't going to catch me, he was basically just running for second. So I ended up beating by like 10 minutes or something.
Being out there for like 9 more miles after mile 17, were you just like nervous the whole time
Hmm.
that you're like, oh, is it gonna just come out of nowhere? What were your feelings during that stretch?
Yeah, again, I was feeling really strong. So yeah, I knew I was running fast, and he was and anyone who was going to beat me was going to have to run a lot faster. And I had at that point, because I'd done the 50Ks, I'd done multiple marathons. I had a pretty good feeling of what it should feel like when you're that point in the race, and I didn't think I was in any danger of uh, the wheels falling off or anything. But also in the Knoxville Marathon. Um, you never want to look behind you, but there's a few places where there's a little out and back, or there's a curve or a turn where you can see. And I knew I had a significant time on him in the last 10K. So all I was focused on was just making sure I continued hydration, continued nutrition, so the wheels didn't fall off, so I wouldn't fall apart.
So, in other words, your advice is to do a 50K to train for a marathon.
It's not a bad idea, honestly.
Yeah. Oh,
It
I've thought
really,
about it many times.
yeah, I mean, it's just a long run, but it really helps to, um, I really think it helps mentally to have gone farther than a marathon. And so you understand that marathon is just a distance. It's just, I mean, there's nothing special about 26.2 miles. And so if you learn your body well enough that you can run a good 50K, then guess what? You can probably run a good marathon too.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, because the half marathon is like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just a half
Hmm.
marathon. Yeah, I understand that completely. Yeah.
And so you had mentioned briefly that about your hydration and nutrition during the marathon. So what did you do for that marathon for your hydration and nutrition, or just overall in marathons?
So it's actually changed a lot since then. I was not. I got lucky with the weather because it was cold. I It took me a long time to figure out hydration, and honestly, only really heading into some of these hot ultra marathons did I really figure out how much nutrition or how much hydration I really need. Because I'm a very heavy sweater and a very salty sweater, so I need to bring in a lot. Um, Back then, it was probably just I would make sure I had something at every water stop, but I would maybe take water at one stop and then Gatorade or Powerade, they had the next one. Um, and I've always been big on my stomach's never been bad as far as gels go. So I was probably
Hmm.
back then I was taking goos. I've switched to spring since then because I like the natural ingredients better. But I've always been kind of every 5 miles, I would go 5 miles, 10, 15, 20, which for me was about 30 minutes. So
Hmm.
as long as I was taking, about 100 calories every 30 minutes, the nutrition was fine. But looking back on it, I'm pretty sure some of my poor marathon performances were due to not understanding my hydration needs as well as I do now,
Hmm.
and just getting dehydrated.
That's another plug for going farther than the marathon distance
Yeah.
because, and that's something that when I'm training for a marathon in December, that I've decided to think more like I'm doing an ultra.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the more you understand your body and what it needs, the better likelihood you're gonna run a good marathon, I think.
Okay. And you were very close to an Olympic trial qualifying time. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I ran 2:19:34, and the Olympic trial standard was 2:19:00. So
Mm.
I missed by 34 seconds,
Oh
and
man.
every time people say, "Oh, couldn't you just run 34 seconds faster?" No, it was all I had. Um, it was out at California International Marathon in Sacramento, which is well known as a fast course where a lot of people
Hmm.
run to set PRs. It's not it's a fair course. It is downhill, net downhill. There are some uphills, but the last 10K is a pretty nice gradual slope downhill into downtown. And really the big things about it are the weather is almost always perfect, and it's in December in Sacramento, so it's usually nice and cool, not humid, and just a lot of people running fast. And so you can usually find a group of people to run with who are kind of shooting for the same time you are, and it's a lot
Hmm.
easier to instead of just running by yourself or whatever. So when I ran 2:19 at that race, I think I was like 50 somethingth place,
Mm.
which is pretty far back for that kind of time.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was so the goal was 2:19, which is 5:19 or 5:18 per mile. And so
Uh,
from mile 1 to mile 21 or 22, I was like 5:15 to 5:18 the whole time, just right on every mile,
mm.
5:15, 5:18, which was my workouts. I was shooting for that 5:10 to 5:15 pace, so everything was spot on. And then around mile 23, I guess I ran a 5:25 or something, and then I
Mm.
just that was all I had from there to the finish. It was like, so I'd been going a couple seconds fast per mile I thought, to give myself a little bit of a cushion, and
Right.
then for the last 4 or 5 miles it was like 10 seconds slow per mile, and then that was it, that
Mm.
was that was it that was the difference.
Hmm.
So it didn't really I didn't really know, because your watch is never going to be exactly on with the mile splits and the course, and so I still was holding out hope until the very end, until you make a final turn into the finish at CIM, and I made that turn, and I saw 2:19 on the clock, and I still had 30 seconds left. So that was
Mm.
really when I knew it was over. But it was still, I mean, I'm not gonna, as someone who was never um super accomplished in high school or college. Um, I ran well enough, but I was never the fastest guy on the team. I was never um, the best in the conference, or to put in the work and accomplish a 2:19 marathon. I was satisfied, even though I didn't get to
Yeah,
run the
yeah.
Olympic trials.
And so
That's
it
great.
seems like it wasn't like too much of a negative setback for you then, because some people, that's what I was going to ask, how did you handle that, or, move on from that and make it maybe a positive experience or learn something from it, but it seems.
Well, I've had some time since then
Hmm.
to let it simmer. I was obviously so immediately afterwards. I wasn't too upset. I wasn't upset at all, really, because yeah, I missed the time, but it was 2018, and the trials weren't till 2020. Um,
Mm.
and I knew I had time to try again. I was fit and feeling good, and obviously it was a PR, so you can't complain about running faster than you ever
Hmm.
have before. But I ended up getting injured um, in in 2019, and I was able to get back to what I thought was PR shape at the end of 2019, and I was ready to hit it again, and then I got sick, um,
Mm.
and then that was it. So I never really got another good chance. And so looking back on it, um, if I had known that at the time that was going to be it, that I was never good, that I wasn't going to run faster again, I probably would have taken it a little harder. Um,
Hmm.
but again, I mean, it's still a 2:19 is still um, faster than I ever thought. Because
Yeah.
when I first started running marathons, the Olympic trial standard was 2:22, and that was my goal. It
Uh,
didn't the time was secondary to just qualifying for the trials. So my goal was to
right.
run a trials qualifier, which was 2:22, and then it got faster. So my goal had to change to 2:19, which I did. I adjusted, but I still had to, look back and say, I still overachieved for what I thought, I was capable of to begin
Hmm.
with.
And so then you had also run Boston a couple of times before that. Was the qualifying standard still 3 hours, or was it
It was slower, yeah. It's gone.
okay?
Boston qualifying's gotten faster since then, and I think it's probably going to be starting to get even faster because it's hard to get into Boston these days.
Huh.
I did the double Boston one year. The last time I was there it was actually 10 years ago, 2014. Um, and it was the year after the Boston bombing, and I
Mm.
was raising money for a charity, and I'm pretty fast, but not fast enough for really anyone to care about me, I guess. But because I had been starting to do some ultra marathons at that time, I'd
Mm.
done a few 50Ks. I did the JFK 50 miler up in DC. I knew I could run 52 miles, and I thought that might get more attention than just trying to run some sort of fast marathon.
Hmm.
So actually, I ran from the Boston Marathon finish up to the start, and then got in my corral and ran the race. So
Oh my gosh.
I was so that was interesting.
That's it.
I ran from Boston to Hopkinton to the
Uh,
start because the start isn't until 10 o'clock a.m.
okay.
So I
Yeah.
started at the finish line at 7. I ran I ran to the marathon start, and then I ran the race.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's like a Dean Carnazes thing that he
I
Yeah.
actually passed Dean.
did
Oh
you.
my gosh.
Dean started 2 hours ahead of me.
Wait a
He's,
minute. So Dean did the same thing? He ran
yeah,
from
yeah.
the
I think he at that time he was doing it every year. I think I don't know if he still does,
Was
but
he really?
yeah, yeah. There's a group that does it. I was the only one. I was the only one who started at 7.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So this is a thing now. So people just do okay.
it's a thing, yeah.
I
Oh
didn't
my
know
gosh.
that.
But yeah, I think Dean started at 5, and
Okay.
I passed him on the way up. Um, up to the start. So he actually said something to me. He could tell that I was doing the same thing. And he said something to me, you make sure make sure you take it easy because that second half's gonna be tough.
Yeah, that's funny. So
Yeah.
is this now you're telling us this is a loophole for those of us who can't qualify for Boston, that we go there anyway and just run it first thing in the morning, the opposite direction.
You can run the course.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. This
yeah,
is a plan now.
yeah.
This gives us hope. Okay.
So what made you want to do that?
It really really was just I hadn't been planning on going back and running Boston because I felt like I'd run it 3 times and it never went well, and it's a great race. I love the crowd and the atmosphere, but I just wasn't running fast there, and that's what I wanted to do. But then when the bombing happened, it was just such a blow. I couldn't believe that someone would attack the race. I wanted to do something to help out some of the victims. And so really that was what the only thing I could think of to like differentiate myself from other people. Because even if I ran my best race ever at Boston, I would still be maybe like 25th or 30th place. And that's just like, it's nice, but it's not. But when people hear, oh, you ran the double Boston, you went both directions in one day, um, and it was I had a a a rather difficult goal. My goal was to do it under 6 hours. So basically, back to back sub 3 hour marathons. So that was the reason I did it, was because I thought that was the best way for me to give back after the bombing thing.
Did you accomplish the goal? Were you able to do it?
So there's a little bit of a loophole there too. So my total running time was under 6 hours. My first marathon was 2:48, and then my second one was 3:11. So elapsed time was over 6 hours, but I had 12 minutes in the corral before the race started. So I started at 7. I got up to the corral at 9:48, and the race started at 10. So my total running time was under 6 hours.
Wow.
So it depends who you
So you're
talk.
doing your own little ultra there. Okay.
Yeah.
This is okay.
Yeah. Well, me and Dean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and Dean. This is funny. Okay.
So yeah, now I'm interested now to hear more about these ultra races that you've done. So out of the ones that you've done recently, I think you've done one this year and then some others. What's one of the most notable ultra races that you've done through your career?
I mean, the most notable has to be the Badwater 135. I did that last year, and like I was saying earlier, I'm absolutely terrible in the heat. Like it's something about my physiology. I've worked on it, done everything I can, and I'm just a heavy sweater. I'm a salty sweater. I get overheated. There's nothing I can do in the heat. And even if you run with me in the summer versus run with me in the winter, it's like I'm a different person. Like I just can't. My body just shuts down. And so ever since I had heard about Badwater 135 when I was in college, it was kind of like, that seems like the hardest thing to ever have. If you don't know what Badwater 135 is, it's 135 miles in Death Valley in July. It starts at Badwater Basin, which is the lowest point in the United States, and ends at Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the continental United States. So it climbs over 3 mountain ranges, and obviously the temperatures are brutal. It was at 9 p.m. at the start, it was 115 degrees.
Oh my God.
And so I watched this documentary about it when I was in college, and that just like stuck in my brain. Like that's something that um when I was training for the Olympic Trials Marathon, it was like I have two things that I'd like to do in my life. I'd like to qualify for the Olympic Trials and the marathon. I'd like to finish Badwater. Not win, not run a specific time, just finish Badwater, which I felt like would be for me would be a good accomplishment. And
Hmm.
so after 2020, when I didn't qualify for Olympic trials, I kind of started thinking, well, maybe it's time to start trying this ultramarathon thing. And so I went out and crewed someone for Badwater and did a couple other the Badwater series of races, and I got in, and um, I finished. It took me, so the cutoff is 48 hours. It took me 45 hours. Um, and it was harder than I actually imagined it would be. And I thought it was going to be extremely hard, but there was several points where I didn't think I was going to be able to. I just thought I was going to time out. Like I was moving super slowly. I was getting overheated. I was getting chilled. It was 115, 120 degrees, and I was getting goosebumps.
Cool.
Like I just couldn't stay. I had ice all over me, and actually my crew wasn't sure what to do because I was cold. I felt freezing, and I was like, "Take this ice off me! I'm freezing." But that's actually one of the signs of overheating. And so it was definitely um, one of my. I mean, again, knowing my physiology,
Hmm.
that was a super high accomplishment for myself to just be able to finish.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Um, Kind of on the same. I mean, I feel like the fast marathon is in a separate bucket than Badwater because they're just very different.
Ethan, in the Badwater, do you sleep? Do you rest at all? And do you have a van sort of following you the whole time? How does
So
that work?
you have to have a crew, and the crew has to have a van, and they shadow you basically the entire time. So there was points where um, they were stopping every quarter or half mile for me, because I needed more ice, needed more water, needed more everything.
Mm.
Um, so for the first 42 miles from Badwater Basin to Stovepipe Wells, which is where the first 18-mile climb starts, you can have crew, but you can't have a pacer. From 42 miles to the finish, you can have a pacer as well. So, I mean, I literally had someone walking with me, um, pretty much that entire last 90 miles, and they had ice water in a spray bottle, just spraying me with ice water, filling my bandana with ice. And then yeah, the van was stopping every half mile, quarter mile, mile, whatever they needed.
Uh, oh, sleeping. Do you sleep at
Oh
all?
yeah. So it starts in the evening, um, and then it took me 45 hours. So I didn't really sleep the day of the race, and then by the time I finished, I'd been up for around 60 hours.
Oh,
And because I was chasing those cutoffs, I didn't really have much like cutoffs. So I was in this weird like area where I knew I had to sleep, but I didn't have time to sleep. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I took two 20-minute naps in there. And honestly, when you're that tired, when you lay your head down and sleep for 20 minutes, it feels like you got a whole night. When I woke up, I felt like completely rejuvenated. I was just like,
Wow.
I'm ready to go. And I got out in the heat and I was like, oh yeah, this is terrible. Road.
Is this a
Not
type
bad.
of race where you could have had hallucinations? Or was it long enough to have hallucinations?
Yeah, people do. I'm I don't know how you define hallucination. I know in the middle of the second night. So the first night obviously is the start, and then we went through a whole first day, and then there's the second night, and the second day that's when I finished. So the second night, I know it was dark and I had a headlamp.
Ask how fast were you going through this? Because I know I was trying to do the math, 135 and 45
It's slow,
hours.
yeah.
What's the pace on that kind of?
So it's about on average, I went about 20-minute pace, about 3 miles an hour.
Okay.
It has to be a little bit faster for the first half, for the first 40 miles because they need you out of Death Valley by 10 a.m. on
Mm-hmm.
the first day. And so that's a strict cutoff. And so I had to average like 4.5 or 5 miles an hour or something for that first 40 miles to make it to that cutoff. But because again of my limitations, I had some um, strict rules for myself. And one of them was as soon as the sun came up, I was not allowed to run at all because it gets so hot. The sun is so draining on me. So I could run at night, but not during the day. But also, I don't want to say it's a disadvantage, but I'm more comfortable running faster. And if I try to slow down my run, it's actually, especially if you're going to be out there for 135 miles,
Mm.
you don't want to be uncomfortable. And so when I was training, I figured out that I could run for like 2 minutes and then walk for like 10 minutes. And that got me, I didn't have to slow down my run, but 2 minutes wasn't long enough for me to overheat.
Mm.
But by running for 2 minutes at a comfortable pace, I could walk for 10 minutes and still hit the goal pace of like whatever it was, 15-minute miles or something.
Right.
So I'd run for like 2 minutes at like 7.5, 8-minute miles, and then I walk for 10 minutes to get my average pace right.
Huh.
But I mean, at night that worked okay because um, I was the sun wasn't as draining, and then during the day I just walked. So the Backyard Ultra format I like. It's a really good way for people to get distance PRs because it's only 4 mile loops, and you have to stop and wait for the next hour before you continue another loop, which requires you to like think about your nutrition and your hydration. Because you have to stop no matter how fast you go your loop. You have to stop until the next hour. Um, I was disappointed because somehow my plan was to go days if I had to. And there was guys there that were ready to go for a long time too. And somehow it was like 24 degrees overnight, and I wasn't paying attention to my hydration, and I got dehydrated. And so like mile 90 something, I started to feel not great. And I got through 100, which is 24 loops, and I kind of perked back up because the sun was coming back up and it was a new day. And I did the 104-mile loop. I started to feel real bad again. Um, and then I got myself back up for the 108-mile loop, and I was sitting down on my chair in between those loops, and I was just kind of like worried that how bad I had felt on the previous loop. I didn't know at the time I was dehydrated because my brain wasn't working because I'd been out there for 24 hours without a crew, and I was trying. I was just I wasn't doing a good job of taking care of myself, and I didn't realize I was dehydrated, and because I didn't think about it because it was so cold, and I was just worried that I was getting real like nauseous and dizzy, and I was worried that if I went out on another loop, I might like not make it back. Which again, it's not very likely, but your brain starts messing with you. And so I didn't start the 112-mile loop, and I was actually pretty disappointed in myself because physically I was fine. The goal had been to go at least 135 because that's my PR, my distance PR from Badwater. And I thought, yeah, I mean, it's not Badwater, right? It's way easier. But the difference was
And what is the race? What is the format of that race? Because you've described a little bit of it, 4 mile loops, and you have to stop for an hour. So yeah,
yeah.
how did that race work?
So the Backyard Ultra it's a format that was, I think it was invented by Laz, who's the genius
Mm.
behind the Barkley
Hmm.
out there in Frozen Head. And basically it's a 4.167-mile loop. Exactly 4.167 miles. And you have to and everyone in the race starts each loop every hour on the hour. And so it's 4.167 miles because that's 100 divided by 24. So if you do 24 loops, you stay out there for 24 hours, you do 100 miles. And so for a lot of people, a 24-hour 100 miler is like a huge accomplishment. Not, I mean, 100 miles is a huge accomplishment, but 24 hours is kind of like a benchmark. And so so really all you have to do is run 4 miles at a time or walk or whatever, because you have to finish within an hour and you have to start again on the hour. So even if you come in at 59:59, if you just turn back out again, you can head back out. But it's a really interesting format because it kind of equalizes the playing field between faster people and the slower people.
Yeah.
Because, if you're faster, you might bring yourself out because you're running too fast, or you might actually get tight sitting in camp for too long. If you're slower and you just come in with a few minutes to spare every time, you might go for a long time. So Laz hosts the World Championship, actually in Bell Buckle, Tennessee, every year. And last year, Harvey Lewis ran 450 miles.
Oh, God.
He was out there for 4.5 days. And the craziest part about it is not just, I mean, we were talking about sleep earlier. Like, you don't have, if you run a loop in 40 minutes, which is super fast, you only have 20 minutes before you have to get out there again. So there's no, in 4.5 days, he wasn't getting more than about 10 minutes of sleep at a given time. But the craziest thing about that is that the race is over as soon as the last person runs a loop that no one else runs. So you can't just keep going on your own if you want to. You have to have someone else there to give you an assist to keep pushing you. So the craziest thing about Laz's 450 miles was there was someone else who ran 446 miles.
Oh my gosh.
And everyone in the race except the last person is a DNF. So everyone did not finish because there's only one person who finished the entire distance, and that's the winner. So it's a pretty fun, interesting format.
What type of were you running in a park or where were you running?
That race, it's called the MAD Backyard Ultra. It's outside of Chattanooga. It's actually it's a 2-mile paved loop.
Okay.
So it was around a park, Camp Jordan.
That's right. That's what I
really?
thought you told me. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
it was, I mean, it was mind numbing.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so it's a 2-mile paved loop. So you had to run each loop twice
Yeah.
for each lap, and there was a little add-on to make it 4.167 miles total. So they changed direction each loop, each hour, so it could have been worse. But yeah, it was quite.
You own a running store. So for those in the Knoxville area, go to your running store. So plug that too.
It's called The Long Run. It's on Sutherland Avenue, right near Young Williams Animal Center. And yeah, we focus mostly on apparel, which is odd, but I think important because you don't really realize how important it is to have, the right clothing for these kind of things. We do have shoes, and we can fit you for shoes, even if you don't want the brands that we carry. We can help you find, the style of shoe you need or whatever. And we carry a lot of stuff for ultramarathoners.
Store. Why?
I'm an engineer. I work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and my partner Julia is a veterinarian, and she was getting a little burnt out. Of veterinary medicine is extremely hard and difficult, emotionally, and we've been involved in the Knoxville running community. We met at a group run, and with our experience with all the Knoxville running stuff, the vision was to have stuff that you can't necessarily find anywhere else. Again, that's why we started with apparel, was because most running specific stores don't focus too much on apparel. They're mostly just shoes, and we were having to order, apparel online from Rabbit or John G or whatever. and it doesn't fit right, or it's you want to feel the material first. And so also we just have a lot of friends in the running community, and we thought it'd be nice to have like an area where people can come and hang out after their runs, or even shout, like go there and shower, run and shower, and go back to work. And so the building that we have on Sutherland actually has showers, has lockers. We beer and other beverages, if you're of age, and we usually have a few local beers on tap, and a nice little lounge area where we have a running library with pretty much any running book you can think of. We've got Normatec boots that you can use for recovery. And so I feel like it hits it's right off the Greenway. So you can start at our store and just get on the Greenway and run pretty much as far as you want. And so I feel like it's a nice addition to the local running community.
Well, all
All right,
right.
well,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, do you have anything, just a closing message or remarks for our listeners?
I mean, yeah, my only what I like to say is, like, you never know what you can do until you try.
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, if you looked at my running resume when I was in high school and college, you would never think that I would go on and run the kinds of times that I ran in the marathon, or the wins, or anything like that. So and being able to finish Badwater with my issues, like, if you have something that you want to accomplish, just set that goal and start working for it, and you never know, what you might be able to accomplish if you keep at it.
Listeners, thank you for joining us on the Tread and Trend Tales podcast. This was a fantastic episode with Ethan Coffey, and I'm so glad that he could join us. It was really a great experience learning a lot more about him, who I've been hearing about for several years in the news and leading our hometown Knoxville Marathon and other races. So I'm so glad to have learned a lot more about him. If you'd like to learn more about Ethan Coffey, his website, The Long Run, is linked in this description and on some of our other postings about this episode. You can also check him out on social media, as he is active there and posting about his races. If you like this episode, I'd highly suggest to listen to two that are very similar to it, with Sophie Littlefair, which was our 4th episode, and with Tia Milan, who was our inaugural episode. They both discussed their ultramarathon experiences as well. Please listen to our other 6 episodes, and we have many more exciting episodes coming soon every Friday, with lots more exciting guests and more to learn from. Thank you for joining us on this podcast, and we hope to see you on the next one.